Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Henry Agrippa. This is Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of the Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy with Book 1, Chapter 8, and maybe some more. I don't know how long these chapters are. I haven't looked ahead, so we'll get as many as we can in about an hour. How the elements are in the heavens, in stars and devils and angels, and lastly, in God himself. Now, bear in mind that the elements are the spirit, right? I'll have a video linked up here called The Divine and the Trinity Explained, where we talk about how God is the Logos, and the Logos is every single element in existence in motion. If that is confusing, I recommend that video. It is the unanimous consent of all Platonists that, as in the original and exemplary world, all things are in all. So also in this corporeal world, all things are in all. So also the elements are not only in these inferior bodies, but also in the heavens, in stars and devils and angels, and lastly in God the Maker and original example of all things. Now, in these inferior bodies, the elements are accompanied with much gross matter. But in the heavens, the elements are with their natures and virtues, vis-a-vis after a celestial and more excellent manner than in sublunary things. This is working off of the idealist assumption, right? Now, I believe that he stated before that he was a realist, but maybe that was the end of the last study and not this study. The difference between idealism and realism is realism deals with the things that are actually here. The idealists say that there is 3 separate worlds and that each one is a better iteration, right? We have the one that we are on, which is the sublunary one, and then you have a kind of a thoughtful one, and then you have a divine one, right? And the divine one contains perfection, and the other ones are reflections thereof. And that's not a bad way of looking at it, but I don't think it is necessarily an completely accurate way of looking at it. And so for me, I'm more of a realist than I am an idealist, even though I do magic, right? I don't believe that there is this third world or third existence outside of where we're at. Now, I do believe that there is another existence, right? That this is a temporary one. We are only here for a short amount of time, and that our soul is eternal. It was somewheres prior to being incorporated in this 5D navigation device, and it will go somewheres when we are done navigating in the 5D space. And so there is another existence, but I don't think that it is necessarily separated from this one in the way that is intimated by the idealist. That there is a ideal man and that we are all each a reflection thereof is anthropomorphizing God in very real terms, and that is always a bad idea. And so let's dive in and finish up, or continue. Back to the text. For the firmness of the celestial earth is there without the grossness of water, and the agility of the air without running over its bounds, the heat of fire without burning, only shining, and giving life to all things by its heat. Also, I should have started with this, but he is talking about elements in the primal, right? Fire, earth, air, water. Not necessarily hydrogen, helium, oxygen, nitrogen. What I was talking about when I said all of the elements are the spirit was that. Now, this is true for this too, right? God is all earth, air, water, and fire. That is true. The Logos is the manifestation of God, as a matter of fact. But it is a difference of terms, right? I believe that every single atom in existence, every single element everywheres, anywheres, is a manifestation of God. God limited himself into the spirit and became all of the elements and then set them into motion. And that's just to clarify that what I mean by elements and what he means by elements are not necessarily the exact same thing, but they do align. Right, he didn't have the understanding of the individual elements. This was in the 1500s, and there was no real understanding of elemental physics at that point. So, amongst the stars also, some are fiery as Mars and Sol, airy as Jupiter and Venus, watery as Saturn and Mercury, and earthy, such as inhabit the eighth orb. Let's look at and find that footnote real quick. I like to do the footnotes because they give you more information, but sometimes it can be a little hard to go up and down depending on how long it is. The eighth orb probably refers to the Earth in this context, which is the eighth globular body counting down from Saturn. Ordinarily, the eighth sphere refers to the sphere of the zodiac, eighth in order counting up from the moon. That is interesting. Not necessarily like useful, but interesting. Like, I maintain that there are 8 planets, right? That we don't count the moon and the sun in that. But that's me being a little pedantic about what a planet is. We have 8, right? Mars, Venus, Mercury. It's Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune. That's our 8. We have 8 planets. They are there. That is the completion of the harmony for me. Now, there's an outside influence that gives us energy. That is the sun. It's not a planet. We have an outside energy that reflects that, right? That's the moon. And again, not a planet. And so for me, we have 8 planets. We don't need to include the Earth, the sun, and the moon. It is important to note that they didn't have the ability to observe out there, so they didn't see Neptune. They didn't know it existed. Right? That was a very recent or fairly recent discovery. And so in this point in time, they had just, I'm pretty sure like this was just after like Copernicus and the telescope, so we could actually see. And so this was the adjustment period between not including Jupiter and Neptune and including Jupiter and Neptune. So, such as inhabit the eighth orb, and the moon, which, notwithstanding by many, is accounted watery. Now, accounting these elementals to that's kind of arbitrary, I think, for the most part. Fiery, yes, absolutely. Sol is fiery. But you're going to have a really hard sell for Mercury being water, seeing as how it is the hottest planet. It is right next to the sun. Yes, I know it moves fast, but that could be fire as well, right? That would be much better represented by fire than it is by water. Just simply is. Now, I understand their reasoning, but it's not right. I mean, it is a very hot planet. There is no water on it. It has none of the qualities of mutability. Right? It moves, but that's air or fire more than it is water. Right? The higher you get, Earth is very stationary, water is a little less stationary, air is a lot less stationary, and fire is not stationary at all. Right? And so the higher you get, the faster the movement. Mercury fits that better too. And so these are somewhat arbitrary designations, and I am sure that they have an effect if you use them in the proper manner, because energetic investment will bring about the right effects if you believe whether it is true or not. And so for me, ascribing these different characteristics to the moon, the different planets, is just completely arbitrary. I mean, it is not necessary for anything that I do at the very minimum, and probably for anybody else as well. And the moon, which, notwithstanding by many, is accounted watery, seeing, as if it were earth, it attracts to itself the celestial waters, and which, being imbibed, it doth, by reason of its nearness to us, power out and communicate to us. Now, that is probably the least arbitrary designation. Because there is, the sun, but because there is a direct influence between that. And you can even draw the corollary that the moon would be in charge of the waters because of that. Right? So that one actually makes sense. There are also amongst the signs some fiery, some earthy, some airy, some watery. The elements rule them also in the heavens, distributing to them these fourfold considerations of every element, vis-a-vis the beginning, middle, and end. Now, 4 threefold considerations. So We do have 12 designations of the constellations, but that is not a universal. Some people used 4, some people used 24 throughout history. The important part was that they were tracking the stars so that they would know when to harvest. And it is a very good tool for that. It is a less useful tool for determining the influences over people. For example, I have a whole video where we explored astrology. To me, there is a lot less meat in astrology than there is in the tarot or some of the other places. And so I don't really deal with it a whole lot over here. Other people do. They are more than welcome to. You can self-identify as these groups and use that for something. But there is no reason to assume that the day that you were born, where the planets were, had any significance. If there were significance, I maintain in my realm of speculation that if there were some significance coming from the sun and the moon and the various planets, it's going to be in your conception. The magnetic influences at the moment of conception is much more important than at the moment of birth. And so for me, again, somewhat arbitrary. And again, like I did a whole deep dive on this, and there's some of them we have reason to attribute, and some of them there is absolutely no reason to attribute. So back to the text. There are also amongst the signs some fiery, some earthy, some airy, some watery. The elements rule them also in the heavens, distributing to them the fourfold. So, Aries possesseth the beginning of fire, Leo the progress and increase, Sagittarius the end, Taurus the beginning of the earth, Virgo the progress, Capricorn the end, Gemini the beginning of the air, Libra the progress, Aquarius the end, Cancer the beginning of water, Scorpius the middle, and Pisces the end. Let's go ahead and see about that footnote too. It's relatively close. The end. This is somewhat misleading, although the elemental trines of the zodiac are often written in this order. It does not display their parallel structure. This arrangement is more revealing. Then we have here the fixed cardinal and mutable signs laid out in a pattern. All right. Of the mixtions before, therefore, of these planets and signs, together with the elements, are all bodies made. Moreover, devils also are upon this account distinguished the one from the other, so that some are called fiery, some earthy, some airy, and some watery. Hence also these 4 infernal rivers: fiery Phlegethon, airy Cocytus, watery Styx, earthy Acheron. And we will look at that one too. Let's go ahead and check out the footnote. We are on 4. Earthly Acheron. Homer mentions only the Styx in the Iliad, calling it the fearful Oath River, because it was the ancient Greek custom to swear by its waters, and later the steep dripping Stygian water. Perhaps because the mythological Styx was linked with an actual stream that flowed in the form of a high waterfall near Nocneris in Arcadia. In the Odyssey, all 4 rivers are placed firmly in hell. There, Pyriphlegethon and Cocytus, which is a break off from the waters of the Styx, flow into Acheron. Milton presents the meaning of the Greek names of the rivers in his description of them. Of the 4 infernal rivers that disgorge into the burning lake, their baleful streams, abhorred Styx, the flood of deadly hate. Sad Acheron, of sorrow black and deep. Cocytus, named of lamentation loud, heard on the rueful stream, fierce Phlegethon, whose waves of torrent and fire and flame with rage. Paradise Lost. Dante mentions the 4 rivers together. We have dealt with the Inferno. It is part of the Ancient Lore playlist. We have done all 3 books. Spencer refers to them severally in The Fairy Queen. I do want to point out that the Divine Comedy from Dante appears to be an explanation of something, right? The first path that he takes is through hell, and it is the hell you create. The second path that he takes appears to be a path laying out self-mastery. And then the third path, the third book, is heaven. And that is, again, the heaven that you create. And so while he was very decidedly a Catholic, many of the ideas relayed in the Inferno is not Catholic. Also, in the Gospel, we read of hellfire and eternal fire. Yes, you do, but you do not see that in the Old Testament, which is a major problem. into which the cursed shall be commanded to go. And again, this is not contained in the Old Testament. This is one of the major contentions that I have, right? There are many. This is not even a main one, but it is one of them, right? There is no hell in the Old Testament. There is no heaven in the Old Testament, not that we go to, right? God resides in his celestial abode, completely separated from us. And there is the land of the dead, to which everyone returns. It doesn't get into where we come from at all. And it doesn't get into eternal punishment. Their sacrifices were for their mortal coil. It was not for their eternal redemption. That is a major point in salvific history if you are looking at it, but there are many reasons to doubt what is in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. And it is just pointing out that there is no eternal hellfire damnation at all in the Old Testament. It is in the New Testament, and there are reasons for that. They are trying to control something. And in the Revelation, we read of a lake of fire. Again, and Isaiah speaks of the damned, that the Lord will smite them with corrupt air. That he does, but it is not an eternal, right? It is a now, right? It is a punishment for your actions now. It is not a punishment for your actions in the afterlife. And in Job, they shall skip from the waters of the snow to the extremity of heat. And in the same we read that the earth is dark and covered with the darkness of death and miserable darkness. The book of Job does not have a whole lot to do with the rest of the Old Testament either. It is definitely an insertion that is at least, it has 3 separate timelines in Job, right? The first part was written here, the second part was written here, and then the third part was probably written way over here. And the first part isn't Jewish. Moreover, also these elements are placed in the angels in heaven in blessed intelligences. There is in them a stability of their essence, which is an earthly value, in which is the steadfast seed of God. Also their mercy and piety is a watery cleansing virtue. Hence, by the psalmist they are called waters, where he, speaking of the heavens, saith, Who ruleth the waters that are higher than the heavens? Also in them their subtle breath is air, and their love is shining fire. Hence they are called in Scripture the wings of the wind. And in another place the psalmist speaks of them, Who makest angels thy spirits, and thy ministers of flaming fire. Also, according to orders of angels, some are fiery as seraphim and authorities and powers, earthy as cherubim, watery as thrones and archangels, airy as dominions and principalities. And again, while you probably can attribute fiery to the seraphim and maybe the authorities, but I don't know that you can just necessarily add cherubim to earthy. I'm pretty sure that you cannot add thrones and archangels to watery, and airy can be the dominions and principalities, but again, that is not necessarily correct. Do we not also read of the original maker of all things, that the earth shall be opened and bring forth a Savior? Let's see what that reference is. 14. Yep, that is completely wrong. All right, this is a complete misinterpretation. This is that whole we're going to have a virgin birth thing that never happened in the Old Testament. Isaiah's prophecy was this woman right here is going to give birth to a child, right? He went to the king and he told the king, hey, give me a sign that you want to see that there is judgment coming. And he's like, oh, I ain't doing that. You're not supposed to tempt God. And Isaiah said, fine, I will give you one. See this woman right here, this maiden, not virgin, this maiden right here, she will get pregnant and give birth. And before the child is old enough to be eating cheese, Babylon is going to come and take you into captivity. And that is exactly what happened. And he said that the child's name was be Emmanuel, and the child's name was Emmanuel. That was the fulfillment of that prophecy in its entirety. There was no virgin birth in the Old Testament. And if you think that there was, I suggest you fall back and read Isaiah. Is it not spoken of the same, that he shall be a fountain of living water, cleansing and regenerating? No, it is not. It is not the same Spirit breathing the breath of life, and the same according to Moses and Paul's testimony, a consuming fire. It is very interesting that we have these two references, because I'm about to step on all kinds of toes, but I kind of do that over here. Moses did not write Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy almost certainly. And so, no, according to Moses, is incorrect. It is almost certain that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the entire history of where the Jews came from, came about during the Second Temple period, the return from Babylon. There is no mention in Kings and Chronicles at all of Moses. That is a very interesting leave out, right? And so there are significant reasons to believe that Moses did not write those books. There is significant reason to believe that it was written during the time of Ezra. And then we got Paul, right? Now, I know that a lot of people give Paul a whole lot of credit, but Paul's experience is exactly the same as mine. He had a spiritual experience by which he was revealed some things. And that is the extent of it. He says that it was Jesus. Doesn't mean that it was. It just means that that's what he says. And in support of that, we have the opposition to all of his teachings from everyone who ever studied with Jesus. Every single one of the apostles that actually sat at the feet of Jesus and learned from Jesus is in direct opposition to Paul, to the point of contention where they almost laid hands on one another. It is a big deal. And so, take Paul's advice if you want to. He's really good at giving you an allegory for the mysticism, but not necessarily for relaying the true and accurate representations of Christ. Told you I was going to step on a toe. That elements, therefore, are to be found everywhere and in all things after their manner, no man can deny. First, in these inferior bodies, feculent and gross, and in celestials more pure and clear. And this is a reiteration of that idealism, right? I don't believe that this is feculent and gross. I think that we are placed in this body by the Creator himself with the purpose of living a life, not to be punished. We are not here to suffer, even though suffering is part of life. It is not a prison planet. You are not condemned here. You don't have to escape from here. You are here willfully and by choice, and if that is confusing to you, fall back to the divine and the Trinity explained. But in the super celestials living and in all respects blessed, right? That is the feculent and gross, that's victim mentality. That's that whole we're on a prison planet thing. That's that whole we're condemned from birth thing. And it's not true. It's simply not true. At least according to my conspiratorial mind. Elements, therefore, in the exemplary world are ideas of things to be produced, and intelligences are distributed powers, and heavens are virtues, and in inferior bodies, gross forms. Next chapter. Chapter 9, of the virtues of things natural, depending immediately upon elements. Of the natural virtues of things, some are elementary, as to heat, to cool, to moisten, to dry, and they are called operations or first qualities. And the second act, for these qualities, only do wholly change the whole substance, which none of the other qualities can do. Let's see if we've got an easy footnote for that. That's an interesting one right there. Yeah, see, most of these footnotes are just, no, okay. And there are some things compounded of elements, and these are more than first qualities, and such as those that are maturating, digesting, resolving, mollifying, hardening, restringing, absterging, corroding, burning, opening, evaporating, strengthening, mitigating, conglutinating, obstructing, expelling, retaining, attracting, repercussing, stupefying, bestowing, lubrifying, and many more. That is interesting, right? And some are in things compounded of elements, right? So this is water. I mean, water is a compound of elements. So is most everything else that you put your eyes upon. The first qualities, maturating, now, natural ripening through the operation of heat and motion. Digesting is maturing with gentle heat, resolving, reducing into compound elements, especially by decay, mollifying, softening, and tenderizing, restringing, constipating, stopping, and binding. Abstergating, cleansing and purging, corroding is gnawing away, conglutinating is cohering, especially healing together, repercussing is beating back or reflecting, stupefying is numbing or deadening, Bestowing is storing up or depositing. Lubrifying is lubricating. The menstrua is menstrual blood, and I don't think we actually got to that one yet. We didn't. We stopped at 13. And many more. So this is just definitions of various things that you may find in alchemy, right? These are things that you do when you are doing the works of alchemy, right? You are maturating the various chemicals into various substances, digesting, resolving, like all of this is just different operations that can be performed upon things. That's okay. Elementary qualities do many things in a mixed body, which they cannot do in the elements themselves. And these operations are called secondary qualities because they follow the nature and proportion of the mixtion of the first virtues, as largely it is treated of in physics books. Right now, this is like rust. Right? You have iron, ferrous oxide is rust. Right? It is a compound on the element that does something that the element can't do for itself. Waste it away. It's a thing, right? Now, you can refine that back into iron ore. It is a process by which you lose a good bit, but it is a possibility. And that's basically what it's talking about. Elementary qualities do many things in a mixed body that they cannot do in the element themselves. Rust is a good example. Verdigris and copper is another one. As maturation, which is the operation of natural heat, according to a certain proportion in the substance of the matter. Induration is the operation of cold. So also is congelation, and so of the rest. And these operations sometimes act upon a certain member, as such which provoke urine, milk, the menstrua, and they are called third qualities, which follow the second as the second do the first. According, therefore, do these first, second, and third qualities, many diseases are both cured and caused. Many things also there are artificially made, which men much wonder at, as is fire, which burns water, which is they call Greek fire. We will definitely pop that out because that is something we are still to this day trying to get right. We have several options that could be. Nobody knows exactly, right? Greek fire was a compound substance used in naval warfare to burn the ships of the enemy, and in siege warfare. Lucan writes of Greek fire from a siege catapult. It is most likely a combination of petroleum and some other substance which would more make it oxidize it and make it burn better. Alright, that is translated by which he elsewhere describes as fire fixed to unctuous torches and alive beneath a covering of sulfur. It had the property of only burning more fiercely when doused with water, making it very difficult to extinguish. That lends me to believe that it's probably a magnesium that was added to it. Right? If you're unaware, magnesium will burn underwater. Some of the other metals will as well, but they are harder to obtain, and it is less likely that they would have been using such a thing in those days. But magnesium is readily available if you have the right mines, and it will absolutely catch on fire and burn like a mad. So much so that what we do in the Navy when something catches on fire and it's made out of that is we toss it overboard. We don't even try to fight it. Like, get it off the ship as quick as possible because it will burn through the ship. That is a real thing. The Book of Secrets gives a recipe. Take quick brimstone, lees of wine, saracalam, a Persian gum resin, piculum, a little pitch, sodden salt, oil of stone, petroleum, and common oil. Make them seethe well, and if anything be put in it, it is kindled, whether it be tree or iron, and is not put out by the piss, vinegar, or sand. Right, so this is a little pitch. That is going to be a petroleum product. Petroleum, well, that comes from plants, right? That's pine produces pitch. There's some of the other trees do as well. But it is an oily substance. It's resinous. Then gum resin is the same thing from a different tree. Brimstone is sulfur, mostly. Oil of stone is petroleum. Common oil is going to be the seed oils. You're mixing a lot of oils with a lot of oils, right? And some alcohol. The lees of wine is going to be the distilled part. And so this is definitely something. Now, I don't see an oxidizer in this. brimstone may contain the magnesium that would be the oxidizer, so there's that. All right, let's get back up here. It was on 15. That's going to be right about there. Of which Aristotle teacheth many compositions in his particular treatise on the subject. Well, fine, we'll look at that one too. In his treatise is mentioned in Aristotle's Problems. This subject has been dealt with most clearly in dealing with fire. This lost work on fire is unknown. The best known work is the subject of for Greek fire was the Liber Igneus, Book of Fires of Marcus Gracius, with recipes dating from the beginning of the 13th century. In like manner, there is made a fire that is extinguished with oil, and is kindled with cold water when it is sprinkled upon it. This is an interesting one. Let's see what they say, because I've got a story for this. Sprinkle it, take lime, which water hath not touched, and put it with a weight equal to it of wax, and of half of it the oil of balm, Semaphoria opobasalum, and naphtha citrina, and equal to it of brimstone, and make a wick of it, and drop the water down like a dew upon it, and it shall be kindled, and drop down oil upon it, and it shall be put out. Marvels of the world. Now, the story that I'm going to tell is one of those that's probably going to step on some toes, but there was a prophet back in the Old Testament, and he was going up against a whole collection of other prophets, and he said, we're going to see who God will favor. And we collected all of these things, and we covered it with water and see if it catches on fire, and his did. Now, it is not unreasonable to expect that maybe he had an idea that was something like this, because there was knowledge that was hidden, right? That is a thing the prophets definitely did. And we had the ability of scientific endeavors from Egypt at a minimum, right? We have alchemy, which comes from the land of Chem, which is quite literally Egypt. And so it is entirely possible that this knowledge, that if you take quicklime and you mix it with some other things and then you add a little bit of water, it will spontaneously catch on fire, right? And it is not something that you can put out. I wonder what would happen if you prepared your sticks with this particular substance and then you poured fire on it, or poured water on it. Do you think maybe it would catch on fire? I bet it would. I bet it would. I bet it would be just like the divine came down and caught it on fire, and that would be the proof that you needed, that God was on your side. I bet that's a thing. What do you think? Do you think it's a thing? Let me know in the comments down below if you think that's a thing. And a fire which is kindled either with rain, wind, or the sun. And there is made a fire which is called burning water. Let's see what that one is. Footnote 18. Burning water. Take black, thick, mighty, and old wine, and in 1 quart of it thou shalt temper a little quicklime and brimstone, beaten into powder, very small, and lees of good wine and common salt, white and gross. Now, this is it keeps adding the salt. Salt is a carrying device, right? It is going to absorb the oils, help them to blend. Salt is really good at adding structure to various things, right? When you're baking bread, if you leave out the salt, you will not get the rise correct. It really takes the salt to help make the structure do what it is supposed to do. Salt is really good for that. And if you didn't know, I'm going to tell you something that's probably a little bit shady on YouTube's behalf. But if you take styrofoam and you put it in a bucket, right? I would prefer a metal bucket, but you could probably do it in plastic. You take a whole lot of styrofoam and you put it in there, and you put in some gasoline, it'll melt and it becomes this really thick, viscous substance that lights on fire rather easily. And if you add salt to that, it becomes a whole force. Just letting you know. Good wine and common salt, white and gross. After thou shalt put it in a gourd, well clayed, and de superposito alembico, thou shalt distill burning water, which thou should keep in a glass. From this formula, burning water would seem to have been simple alcohol. No, that is not what that is saying at all. That is a completely wrong conclusion to take from that. Black, thick, mighty, and old wine. Again, that is distillation, right? Black, thick, mighty, that is distilled wine. Probably closer to brandy than wine. And then in 1 quart, you shall temper quicklime and brimstone. That's not alcohol at all, right? Both of those are very volatile substances. Beaten into a powder very small, and the lees of good wine and common salt. Again, right? Now, the lees are, it's the distillation, but it is like you take all the alcohol out and the lees are left over, and then it kind of condenses from there. And so this is not just simple alcohol. Whoever wrote that particular note was either deceptive or just ignorant. We'll leave it at that. The confection whereof is well known, and it is consumes nothing but itself. And also there are made fires that cannot be quenched, and incombustible oils, and perpetual lamps, which can be extinguished neither with wind, nor water, nor any other way. Which seems utterly incredible, but that there had been such a most famous lamp, which once did shine in the temple of Venus, in which the stone asbestos did burn, which being once fired can never be extinguished. Now, you can use asbestos as a wick, but you can't use it as a fuel source. Asbestos is fireproof, right? Now, we refine it through a fire process, but it doesn't burn on its own. As far as I am aware, I can be wrong on that, but it can, however, wick forever. I mean, wicking is taking the oil and just through the process of, is it osmosis or capitulation or whatever, it rises up the stalk. I mean, it is a fibrous material, much like a canvas, but it is fireproof, and so it'll wick the oil up, it'll burn the oil, but it doesn't burn the wick. Therefore, you have a wick that will never go out, but the oil will. Right? There is no such thing as an ever-burning lamp. There can be an ever-glowing lamp, but there cannot be an ever-burning lamp. Right? Burning requires a fuel source at a very minimum. Right? We dealt with this in ISIS Unveiled, but not everybody watched those videos. They were talking about tombs, that they opened the tombs, and inside the tombs there was burning lamps, and I'm like, that's absolutely impossible. Right? If there is going to be fire, now glowing and fire are two different things. But if there is fire ever burning as opposed to ever glowing, then it requires oxygen. Fire absolutely requires oxygen. Removing oxygen will remove the fire. And if you seal up a stone edifice, you're going to run out, and it's got a fire inside of it, it's going to get rid of the oxygen. It will burn through the oxygen, and it will not burn anymore. So it can glow forever, right? Now, that again is going to be an exceedingly difficult thing to do, but there are iterations of things that can be considered ever glowing, but not ever burning. You can make it burn a very long time. You cannot make it burn forever. Also, on the contrary, wood or any other combustible matter may be so ordered that it can receive no harm from the fire, and there are made certain confections with which the hands being anointed, we may carry red-hot iron in them, or put them into molten metal, or go with our whole bodies, being first anointed therewith, into the fire without any manner of harm, and such like things as these may be done. We are definitely going to look at that footnote, because as far as I am aware, that is not true. A marvelous experience which maketh men go into the fire without hurt, or to bear fire or red-hot iron in their hands without hurt. Take the juice of bismalva, hollyhock, and the white of an egg, and the seed of an herb called psyllium, also pulcheria herba, and break it into powder, and make a confection, and mix the juice of a radish with the white of the egg. Anoint thy body or hand with this confection, and let it be dried, and after anoint it again. And after that thou mayst suffer boldly the fire without hurt. See also, if thou wilt bear fire in thy hand, that it may not hurt thee. That is interesting. I see no reason why this would work at all, right? There is nothing in hollyhock that is going to be naturally flame retardant. Definitely not from the white of an egg or the seed of an herb, right? So I don't know what psyllium is, or pulcheria herba. Right? They may be fireproof, and maybe that's what it is, but I do not have any reason whatsoever to believe that this particular recipe will actually lead to anything where you can pick up molten iron, right? I've dealt with molten and very hot iron many times. If you're unaware, I used to be a blacksmith before I injured my back. And so I've dealt with metal quite a bit, and I find it extremely doubtful that you're going to pick up some 1200 degree iron just because you put some plant juice on your hands. That's probably going to end quite badly for you. I would not suggest that at all. There is also a kind of flax which Pliny calls asbestium. The Greeks, which is not consumed by fire, of which Analaxius saith that a tree compassed about with it may be cut down with insensible blows that cannot be heard. And all right, so we're gonna look at these two. Right? 21. Asbestos is a mineral that readily separates into hair-like fibers, immune from the effects of common flame. We talked about that already. For this reason, it was called salamander's wool, down, hair, and when woven, salamander cloth. It makes an excellent lamp wick for a perpetual lamp, one constantly replenished with oil so that it doesn't go out. That is true. Since such a wick does not need to be replaced, an operation necessitating the extinguishing of the lamp cannot be heard. There has been invented also a kind of linen which is incombustible to flame. It is generally known as live linen. And I have seen before now napkins that were made of it thrown into a blazing fire in the room where the guests were at table, and after the stains were burnt out, came forth from the flames whiter and cleaner than they could possibly have been rendered by the aid of water. It is from this material that the corpse cloths of monarchs are made, to ensure the separation of the ashes of the body from those of the pile. This substance grows in the deserts of India, scorched by the burning rays of the sun. Here, where no rain is ever known to fall, and amid multitudes of deadly serpents, it becomes habituated to resist the action of fire. Rarely to be found, it presents considerable difficulties in weaving it into a tissue. In consequence of its shortness, its color is naturally red, and it only becomes white through agency of fire. By those who find it, it is sold at prices equal to those given for the finest pearls. By the Greeks, it is called asbestinion, a name which indicates its peculiar properties. Anaxialius makes a statement to the effect that if a tree is surrounded with linen made of this substance, the noise of the blows given by the axe will be deadened thereby, and that the tree may be cut down without their being heard. For these qualities it is that linen occupies the very highest rank among all the kinds that were known. I have no frame of reference for that, right? It may be a true thing. I have no way to even, like, the sound thing is a thing, right? You can surround anything with a sound dampening cloth and dampen the sound. And it doesn't have to be made of a particular flax. It can be made of linen or papyrus, right? If you surround it, it is going to deaden the sound. That is just like physics, right? If you enclose something with a soft surface, there's nothing for it to echo off of, there's nothing for it to pass through, it's going to stop, right? That's why we sound deaden walls. I don't have that done here, but some people do in their studios. And so that is absolutely a thing. But this asbestos plant, I am unaware of a plant that doesn't burn. Right? It doesn't mean that it's not there. It can have a high mineral content, and that would prohibit burning. That is absolutely a thing, but I'm not familiar with it, so I don't have a whole lot to say about it. It is entirely possible that in the desert somewheres there is, but nothing grows without water. That is a thing, so that's part of it as well. All right, we're getting a little bit long. We will do On Virtue of Things when we return in the next episode. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic, right? I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. The things that I point out are blatantly obvious to me, right? That is because of my understanding, because I have taken the time to go through and do the studies. Not everybody does that, right? Most of the people who go by the book don't actually read the book, and that is just a sorry fact, and many of the ones that do apologize for the book. There is a whole school that you can go to and graduate from, several of them, to be an apologist for that book, to make apologies for the inconsistencies in the book. I don't do that. I read the book in the way that it was written, with the glasses taken off of predestination, right? These are the chosen people, and this person had to die for your salvation, just to see what the book said, and it didn't say that at all. And so, well, I mean, it did, but it was obvious that it was lying. And so I have problems with it. That's why I refer to it so often. That's why we did the whole study. When I started this study, it was not with the intention of ending up where I did. I promise you that. I resisted it a lot. But it was what had to be. It is simply the truth, right? There is no virgin birth. That was not even the prophecy. That was invented to help understand what they were trying to do, right? They had this man who was trying to end the blood sacrifice. They were forming a whole religion around him, and to help, they said that he was born of a virgin. They created a whole prophecy behind it, even though that doesn't exist. That is a common problem in that particular book, and so there's not a whole lot to pull from it. It is, again, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy almost certainly had nothing to do with Moses. That was completely invented later. That's a big problem. And I understand that that steps on toes, but honestly, if the honesty breaks your toes, then your toes needed to be broken. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, follow, throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there's another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.